Eddie Inzauto, GamerNode.com, and today I'm reviewing Euphoria, Build a Better Dystopia, from Stonemaier Games. It's designed by Jamey, Stegmaier, and Alan Stone, and it is a worker placement game, but it's very unique. It has a very strong theme, and a theme that is not seen very frequently in the board gaming space. It's about a dystopic future where you as the player are trying to assert your influence over the four factions of society and become the new leader of this dystopia. The way that you'll do that is by rolling dice, which will become your workers, and then using those to place in various spaces throughout the very, very busy and somewhat threatening looking board. When you first look at it, there's so much going on that you think it's more complex than it is, but it's a fairly light worker placement once you get a handle on what's actually going on. And you'll be using these various spaces to increase your worker pool, to gain various different commodities that each of these factions is in control of, and collecting different resources that'll help you do things like building markets in each of the different territories and placing your influence tokens, which is the ultimate goal in board gaming terms, on those spaces, showing that you have contributed to that area of this society and people recognize that. Each player has 10 of these influence tokens, and the game ends when the first player has placed all of them in various places on the board or in their player area. A quick rundown of some of the places that you can add your authority tokens are in the various territories of the four different factions, on any of your recruits who will be members of these four different factions, or in any of those 6 markets, as I said before. So the path by which you get to this end goal is by building up your commodities, electricity, food, and water, using those to gain yourself various resources, gold, clay, stone, and then using those things in combination to open up these markets, to find artifacts, and spend them to claim lands in each of these territories, and to put your workers to work raising the allegiance of each of the factions to you. Some of the primary concepts you need to be aware of in Euphoria are worker intelligence and worker morale. These 2 tracks determine your hand size, and the hand size refers to the artifacts that you'll be holding in your hand before you can use those to purchase lands in territories and increase your authority over the dystopia. And the worker track actually works somewhat in reverse. You're trying to keep your workers dumb because the smarter they get, the closer they are, the more likely they are to figure out what's going on, how awful this world is, and then run away. So if at any time you roll your dice, which represent your workers, and the total number shown on those dice, plus their spot on the knowledge track, is greater than 16, you have to place a worker back in the pool, only to try to get them back again later. And to do that, you take your workers over to the worker activation tank, you pay a commodity like electricity or water, and you produce a new worker, either reducing worker knowledge in the process from the electric shock, or increasing worker morale from all this water. I think it says a splash of water to the face in the rule book, which is wonderfully written. But although you start the game with 2 workers, you may be going to this space many more than 2 times, because you'll be gaining and losing. When you roll high, it's kind of like, no, I just lost a worker. So as we travel around this board, even though it's a little daunting, we can actually isolate each faction section because they're pretty much the same. Each one has their main area. The Euphorians have a generator, the Subterrans have an aquifer, and the Wastelanders have a farm. The Icarites have a cloud mine. So in any of these places, you can place as many workers as you like, and what you'll be doing is generating the commodity that this particular faction specializes in. If you place any combination of workers from 1 to 4 on the die faces, you will earn 1 electricity, and you will advance on the allegiance track. Because the idea is that you have dumb workers working at the generator, or working at the farm, or working at the aquifer, just becoming more and more like good little sheep and submitting to their faction. If they're sort of in the middle of the road in their knowledge and intelligence, they'll start to get dumber from just working these menial jobs, and you will decrease your knowledge track. But if you get a bunch of them together, they'll produce more, they'll be more efficient, but they'll start to talk, they'll gain more knowledge, and you'll find your workforce is getting too smart for your own good. And then eventually when you re-roll, it's going to bring you that much closer to rolling a 16 and having someone run away. So you always want to balance your intelligence, your worker knowledge. And this is the exact same for each of the 4 factions. As you go up on the allegiance track, you'll be increasing production at these spaces, only by 1, but it may be beneficial to hit this 1 to 4 and increase that allegiance. The other area in each of the factions is that tunnel. Each of the 4 factions is trying to dig their way to the other faction's territory. The Euphorians can produce electricity, but they need water, so they're digging down to the subterranean area. And on the way, they're spending their electricity, and they're either digging up gold or they're finding artifacts along the way. And the artifacts are various different things from the previous society, like teddy bears, which can later be used because they're very valuable. They're highly prized in this dystopian society. So the Euphorians are trying to get water from the Subterrans. The Subterrans are doing the same. They are spending their water, they're finding stone or artifacts on their way to get to the Wastelanders' food. And the Wastelanders are spending their food and picking up either clay or artifacts on their way to get electricity from the Euphorians. High above them all, the Icarites are not digging a tunnel because they think they have it all figured out, puffing on their bliss drug. But you can go to any of their special markets to accomplish roughly the same goals. The last little area is the market area. So 2 of the markets in each of these areas you'll have to build. The players will work together depending on player count. You'll have to place either 2, 3, or 4 workers there, and whoever has contributed then gets to add their influence to this space, and whoever hasn't has some detriment until they can complete the goal here at the market and also put their authority token on the tile, which is really interesting, very cool, kind of cutthroat, and somewhat devastating if you're pulling the right tile. There are only 6 on the table at once, but there's a whole stack that can be selected from the beginning of every game. And lastly is the special hexagonal market here. This is the artifact market, where you'll be spending your artifacts to immediately claim land in the territory, which is represented by this star-shaped thing, and these just block off the number of players. This is set up for a 3-player game, so there are 3 spaces in each of these. And when you pay 3 different artifacts that are worth so much to these people in this dystopia, you'll claim these territories and assert your influence and authority. And just like these markets that flip over when they've been built and reveal a space for players who haven't contributed to then contribute, There are other spaces on the board that are revealed later on, like the end of the tunnels. If this little man gets to the end of the tunnel, this digger, because you've placed your worker here enough times, then these Euphorians have now reached subterranean area, and they're able to claim water. So in this case, anyone who has a Euphorian recruit can now place here exclusively, whereas in this one, the Wastelanders can place there exclusively, or in this one, the Subterrans can place there exclusively once they've gotten to the end to gain the resource or the commodity of the faction to which they've been trying to get the entire time. So the board sort of develops as you go, not only with things revealing themselves, but also with players taking space on the board. So that's a very interesting thing. You see this allegiance track makes changes. As it gets to the second area, it lets you claim double bonuses for digging. And if you get to the end, it lets you reveal a second recruit. So players can have these recruits who have different abilities when you take various different actions. And if you have them, you gain the benefits of these exclusive spaces, like I said before. Also, once you've reached the end of this allegiance track, if you have a character of that faction, you place one of your authority tokens there, and it gets you one step closer to winning the game. You can gain more followers by completing a very interesting thing called the ethical dilemma. At any time, you can spend a very specific artifact or two different artifacts to do one of two things. You can either publish an expose, in this case, draw two recruits and keep one, thus choosing which faction you want to have a recruit from, or publish propaganda, and you just place your authority token immediately on this card. So either way, you have the opportunity for one more authority token, but if you fight the system, let's say, instead of going with the dystopia, you have the opportunity to gain benefits along the way via your recruit and via maybe his faction allegiance. But of all the things that Euphoria does differently and somewhat brilliantly, the most interesting thing to me is probably these types of spaces here. You see they have a dotted line, if you can see that. So players can bump other players out of these spaces. So there's no locking out. If I was here and you wanted to place here, you just push me out and I get that die back to then keep using. And that's great because it kind of solves the problem of the Manhattan Project, a game like that, where players leave their workers out on the board for who knows how long. And then one action that's possible is to pull them all back. Same here. On your turn, you're either placing a worker or pulling all of your workers back. So each player can plan to have their workers pushed back to them by other players, and the way they can do that is taking spaces that they know other players want. That way they'll be bumped out, and they won't have to waste a turn to draw their workers back. And importantly, every time you do retrieve your workers, you have to either feed them, drug them, or make them sad. So if you feed them or give them bliss, you go up 2 on the morale track. If you don't feed them or give them bliss, you go down 1 on the morale track. And you may have cards in hand. And if you go down on this morale track, boom, that's the number of cards you can hold. So you have to discard them right away. So you have to manage your hand size, which is the morale of your workers. Just like you have to manage your worker knowledge, which is your ability to maintain a pool of dice to take actions later. And the way that all of these different mechanics intermingle just makes it all work very well. There's also the fact that if at any time you roll doubles on any of your dice, you can take 2 actions. So one of the things that you might try to do is lock other players out of building these markets. Because if you've built the market and someone else hasn't, you get your authority token. That's all well and good. They can come back and get one also. They just have to do some work here. But that's spending a turn. And until they do it, they have problems. You may not use first and second tier allegiance track bonuses. That's an example. So in that case, they wouldn't get a double bonus from digging in the tunnel, and they wouldn't get an extra commodity when going to the generator, aquifer, or farm. These are kind of a big deal. Another one is you may not place more than one worker per turn. So that eliminates your ability to take doubles. Here, you gain knowledge whenever you place an authority token. That's lame. You may not place workers on occupied construction sites. That's what the generator, aquifer, and farm are. They're called construction sites. So even though these spaces accommodate as many workers as you want to place there, so long as you're willing to gain the knowledge from that, with that market, if you haven't contributed, you can't place there. So all these things, they sort of interweave, and it's just really great. And with a lot of players, it's fantastic because you can have a player who has, a specialty in faction, just getting recruits of the same faction and earning bonuses that way through their special abilities and their special privileges. Or you can diversify and take a little from here and a little from there, because eventually you're going to have to. You're going to need food to feed your workers, or you're going to need bliss to give to your workers. You're going to need water or electricity if you're trying to gain more workers. So you have to do everything, and the way that you set up your recruits combined with your strategy of placing around the board has a real effect on the outcome of the game. And that's kind of a problem with it at 2 players. It loses a lot of the dynamics that you find in the 3 to 5 player game and presumably the 6 player game. I've heard that the 6 player game gets really long and congested, but I know that the 3 to 5 player game is fantastic and smooth and fast because it's turn after turn. You just do one little action, next player does one little action, and you go around the board. And because you can always push workers away, there's a lot less of that time where you go around the board and the person right before you takes the move that you wanted, that you've been thinking about the whole time, and now all of a sudden you don't know what to do, so you have to sit there and go, oh my god, my plans are ruined. Now I'm stuck looking at this board. That doesn't happen. You're going to help your opponent, and you have to think about, wait, do I want to give him his worker back? Otherwise he has to pull his workers back, and he has no food, and he'd have to lose morale, and maybe he'd lose an artifact card. But if it's the only thing I can do, I'm going to have to do that and give him his worker back so that he has the opportunity to sort of get a second chance. And it's really fantastic, and I do love it a lot. I think it's a great game. And I think it's superior in a lot of ways to a lot of worker placement games that are on the market right now. And I think that it's original, it's very thoughtful in the way that it was put together, and just, like I said, somewhat brilliant. I think Stonemaier Games does very good work, and I think the guys over there really know what they're doing. And by putting such a thick layer of theme on top of it, it makes it more accessible. Because once you learn what's going on, despite the board looking ridiculous, made out of boxes and squares and dotted lines and hexagons and stars and solid lines and pentagons and whatever, once you know what's happening, it's like, oh, this is so simple. It makes so much sense, and it's so interesting. Like, there's a story here, and that's great. I mean, not a story as in a narrative that you read as you play, but there's something behind it that suggests that you're doing this for a reason, and I love that. And that's just icing on the cake of a game that has great mechanics. So, Euphoria, Build a Better Dystopia, I give this a 4 out of 5 on GamerNode scale. Certainly recommended unless you're just someone who plays at 2 players. If you play at 2 players, there are a myriad of other games that actually work a lot better at that player count. Other than that, beautiful. And because of the different theme, I think it's something that might get to the table in cases where other games with sort of the classic, working on a farm or having a war or whatever sort of themes will not. So it's going to appeal to a different section of the gaming populace. So yeah, great game. The components are solid. I guess I didn't mention that. The components are wonderful. They're little wooden lightning bolts, little gold bars. The bricks are kind of lame. The little food, it's like an apple or persimmon or something. Water droplets for water, and these little puff clouds, all in nice colors. These tiles are of good quality. The card stock is excellent. Just the board, great art, all very nice. These dice are a little funky at first. They're regular pips surrounded by gears. They're, when I first looked at it, I was like, what is going on? Then I realized it's actually just very simple. So there's that. But they're good quality dice, all good quality stuff. Great game. Euphoria, Build a Better Dystopia. Stonemaier Games, Jamey Stegmaier, Alan Stone. 4 out of 5 from GamerNode.com. And that's it. That's the game. Thanks for watching. If you like videos like this, please be sure to like and subscribe, and you'll be notified whenever we post something new. Hit us up on GamerNode.com, Facebook.com/GamerNode, and Twitter.com/GamerNode or @GamerNode. Say hi. Tell us what you want to see next, or what you don't like. I'll definitely respond and try to accommodate. Thanks a lot. See you next time.